Hello, everybody. My name is Sunil Naphray, Transformational Life Coach, NLP practitioner, and clinical hypnotherapist from Life Genius. And it's a great pleasure to be doing another podcast with another amazing guest. I've been very blessed throughout the day working with some absolutely awesome guests. And Ivonne, who is from Colombia in the United States of America, is of no exception. So can I just say, thank you for coming, Ivonne, and welcome to this podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sunil, for having me. I'm super excited to join you today.
Thank you so much indeed. And before I go into some questions that would be to give the viewers some idea of Yvonne's achievements, despite some issues that she had in her early life, I just wanted to go through some background information about her, just as a means of introducing Yvonne, our very special guest on this podcast. Yvonne is a native of Colombia, and she was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, which is retinal cancer, at the age of 1. And to keep the cancer from spreading to her brain, both eyes were removed. And since then, Yvonne has prosthetic eyes, but that didn't stop her. She was mainstreamed at her local kindergarten school through grade 6 or 6th grade at the New York City Lab School for 7th through to 8th grades, and then to the Trinity School for grades from 9 to 12. And in 1999, Yvonne went on to graduate from Stanford University with a BS in mathematics, and in 2008, she obtained her MBA in finance from the Zicklin School of Business at Baruch College in New York City. Yvonne has worked in the nonprofit sector and in the corporate world in fundraising, finance, project management, and human resources. Today, she is a professional athlete and entrepreneur. And I came across Yvonne's work, I'd say about 6 weeks ago, when I was watching some training videos on coaching. And then I came across an interview that Yvonne did with a head senior coach at a coaching company, and I was so impressed with Yvonne's. I mean, Yvonne is going to reveal her story, but it's just nothing but pure resilience and zeal and commitment of the human spirit, and what people can achieve despite everything against the odds. It really is an amazing, inspirational story. And I have to say, when I listened to this story, it was probably 6 weeks in lockdown, and I think everybody was affected. I mean, even me, I'm a transformational life coach, but I was thinking, what is going on here? So everybody was being challenged in all sorts of mental, cognitive, emotional ways. But when I watched Yvonne's interview as part of a podcast, I believe, with a senior coach, I was just inspired. I wanted to do more in my life at that moment. So I'm so privileged that I've managed to find Yvonne's contact details, that they weren't ready available on the content description box of that YouTube. But then I thought she must be on LinkedIn, and I found her on LinkedIn. And so, all this time now, it's well worth the wait. So Yvonne, that is enough of me.
Thanks, Sunil. Thank you so much.
I'm going to let you do a lot, because your story is so inspiring. And really, if we begin, then Yvonne, if you could share your story with us in your own unique way, and then tell us how you got into coaching, because you're a coach as well, which is so impressive.
Absolutely. I think that you nailed a lot of the main points of my life story. So thank you so much for doing that introduction.
It was amazing, really is.
I like to have people, I don't often find that I like to talk about myself, but rather to use the experiences that I've gone through to share life's lessons, and then to give people hope and inspiration. So I'll try and be brief. I think what also stands out about my life is that my parents came to New York City seeking cancer treatment for me. And when they were told that the treatment was going to last 2 years instead of 3 months, And then subsequently I was blind. They really decided that this United States was going to be the place that would offer me the best educational opportunity and the best just chances to really make a life for myself. And so they uprooted themselves and my family. I have two older sisters, and they moved to the US. And they didn't know any English. My dad was the CEO at a bank in Colombia at the time, and it came to the US to work in a factory. And so my mom was teaching in Colombia at the time, and she came to the US, and basically they both had to start from scratch and redo all their college education and learn English and raise three daughters. And I think just knowing all their um, dedication to their family, to their child, their efforts to make sure and ensure that we succeeded in life and that we had what we needed as children, that has really just fueled such space of gratitude in my heart that it just propels me to continue to try to be the best version I can be day in and day out. And hopefully I can share that with people in everything I do. And so that's really why I've decided that it's now time, after having the experience of being in nonprofits and in the corporate world and racing for Team USA and being at reaching one of my biggest dreams, which is probably reaching the Paralympics in 2016. Now I'm into healthcare, and I've moved into massage therapy, and I'm pursuing my doctorate in acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And I feel it's the right time to start working with individuals, and that's why coaching has really brought all of those pieces of life together for me. So that's why I'm into the coaching space now, and it all comes at the right time, right? And then you and I have connected all at the right time, and
Yes,
and
yeah.
so it's just a wonderful synchronicity.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. I think I share your sentiment there about how coaching evolves from your life in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I 10 years ago, I mean, I think I always coached indirectly, but I wouldn't call it coaching. It was more
Right. Yeah.
indirect teaching, because I've always been a teacher ever since I qualified 27 years ago. Education's my main craft. But then what
Mm-hmm.
evolved from there was a coaching ambition to be able to work with individuals and to help them whatever life challenges that they actually had. And I just felt that listening to your story gave me lots of inspiration on, my gosh, the depth of gratitude that you felt in your life actually kind of made me, I mean, I believe I am almost grateful. I'm very mindful, but it just got me thinking about gratitude at a much higher much higher level. And that
Yeah.
actually has been very powerful for me as a coach in helping people through their issues, but also getting to see and feel their own human potential.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I wanted to kind of ask you was, during that time, did you, because you're a very, very resilient, very, very strong, powerful person, but did you feel at the time that when you were in your younger days, did you feel that that what was in front of you was obstacles, or did you see them as something else?
I would have to say there were definitely days when situations arose that
Yeah,
really seemed insurmountable,
yeah.
especially as a kid,
Mm,
because as a kid you really want to feel like you belong, right? It's one of
yeah,
those needs that Maslow talks about, right? The hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy. You want to feel like you belong, and you
yeah,
have that need to be part of a
yes,
group and parts of community. And even though I was mainstreamed, which basically means I was in school with all sighted children and I was the only blind child, and my sisters are sighted and my parents are both sighted, and where we lived, I was the only blind child in that building of, close to 100 apartments, right? So it's I can recall I was probably about 8,
mm,
and I remember just taking a bath one night and just sobbing because, I wasn't invited to play with the popular kids at the playground. And, and of course, at that moment, you don't realize that children don't intentionally
No.
do mean things. They just do them because they want to feel like they're also popular, right?
Yes.
And when we don't look like them, or we don't do what they're doing the same way, right, then they don't want to be with you. And the
Yeah.
truth is, at that moment, no, I couldn't run across the schoolyard, right, and play tag.
Mm.
I needed to be able to run with someone. But at 7 or 8 years old, you don't know that, and that doesn't click, that if you just held somebody's hand, right, because you
Mm.
could run across the yard together, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, at those kinds of moments, you think, this is just not fair, and I don't want to go back to school, and no one likes me, right? All these things out of a tiny incident of not being able to play tag after lunch, right?
Mm.
And but after my bath, it was one of those moments where, my mom's combing my hair and she's talking and I've been crying, and I just remember she would always say, you can do whatever you set your mind to.
Yes.
And then she would say, look at me, I've learned English, or look at your dad. By this time, my dad was close to finishing his bachelor's, because it took a while,
Yes.
right? He couldn't go to school full time. So, by this time we've been in the States for about 7 years. And so she would often say these things, which at that time I'm like, I don't really care about dad not, almost finishing school, right? Like, that's not what's important for my feelings right now. But it gets you through that moment where it takes your mind off of that moment of despair, right? It's like, okay, someone's telling you should kind of pay attention, you should listen,
Yes.
they're mumbling some words, but subconsciously, I think the brain knows, even at a young age, like, yeah, this is a way to snap you out of it, and so
Yes.
there are definitely times like that. And even as I grew up, right, and we start to try to develop our own identity, where you struggle with, where is it that I fit, and what is it that I enjoy doing, and how do those pieces all come together? So
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think absolutely, with the power of the subconscious mind cannot be underestimated. I mean, I know there's some debate whether it's 90% of your overall mind space, or it's 90, or it's 85, but it's very significant. And I think
Yeah.
that probably later on in my life, though, I began to learn how, first, it exists, and secondly, how powerful it is. And for me, when I listen to your story, Yvonne, I also think back at my times in my life where sometimes I've had to dig deep. I've had to find a way, and I had to be still. And again, it may well be after a period of emotional turmoil, being in tears or being upset, and then
For
suddenly,
sure.
I don't know, maybe there's some connection there, but the emotional response to an event in your conscious mind, then for me, triggers something in my subconscious. Well, okay, this happened, but have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about this, that, and the other? And then I began to look at uh, other ways. So would you say that in some respects, that even though obviously clearly there were some obstacles for you, but you actually acquired um, a depth of understanding about resourcefulness, looking at, never say never, but let's look at everything before we shut the door.
Absolutely. And I think that moment in school at that young age was really one of those moments that, stays with you, and it stays with you in a way that inspires you to not want to go through that emotion again.
Yes.
And so the
Yeah.
way not to go through that again is to problem solve and find another method of doing something, right? And
Yes.
so
Yes.
I think that's, and I remember, like, somewhere around that time that my dad was doing some work in calculus, and You know, I used to sit with my dad a lot. That's probably where my love of numbers comes from, is from my dad's side of the family. And so, you know, even at age 8, I would sit 8, 9 years old. I'd sit with my dad and ask him what he was doing. And that was one of those times was my introduction to calculus, right? And
Yes.
I remember him explaining to me, you know, just how to measure integrals. He was working on integrals, and he ended up using a can of beans, and the label on the can of the beans and then the top of the can and the bottom of the can, you know, just to explain different area and what he was working on.
Wow.
And I found that to be so like nifty, you know, of my dad at that point, to break down these graphs, right, that he was looking at, measuring the area under the curve and all this stuff that goes into integrals. And, you know, and he thought, how do I make this tactile for my daughter? And he, you know, he's like, I got it, you know, here's the can of beans, let's work with this. And so, you know, I think that's probably why I went into math. Not necessarily that I was thinking I was going to do something specifically like actuarial work or, you know, teaching math or something along those lines, but it was the problem solving aspect of math that I just feel like it's been so applicable to many areas of life. And so, yeah, I mean, you look for those opportunities and you say, how do I make it happen? Because I still want to do that, you know. And needless to say, I ended up pairing up with one of our fastest, you know, in 4th grade, one of our fastest runners, and that's how we ran. We ran hand in hand, you know, across the gym, and you know, so something came out of it a year or 2 later from that playground incident. You know, you just never know. And it's all about how do you go about making it happen somewhere down the line, you know, although we want it today, right now, right? But it takes a little bit of time to put those pieces in place.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because what I'm thinking about now is when you look at polarity of emotions, you know, for example, you know, maybe you feel one may feel very blissful and happy because you've had to experience when it wasn't blissful and it wasn't happy, and now you are.
Absolutely.
It makes you much more aware of what happiness is. And sometimes happiness can maybe be many things, but it could be that you overcame something. Now you're in a much more you know, a much more happier place, or you know, you've achieved something, or you've gone over certain obstacles, or you've learned something significant. So sometimes the polarity with the emotions, the negative and the positive and things like that, that can also kind of help us in our life journey to put things into perspective. And then we never forget, you know, like you mentioned, you know, the playground incident. And I can remember, I mean, for me, I mean, I never planned to become a teacher. I had very poor schooling. My probably not so much primary, but in the UK, we have primary schooling up until the age of about 11, and then 11, probably high school in America equivalent, probably. We have the comprehensive school, state education from 11 till 16. It was horrible. It was not pleasant at all. And I felt, my goodness, that, you know, and only later on I realized the reason why I had poor schooling was because I was destined to become an outstanding teacher, and also work with lots of teachers in the UK, helping them to. So, but I couldn't have achieved that if I hadn't have gone through the others. So it's kind of the power of polarity, you know, I think comes to mind, you know, when you talk about your, you know, your own story. Tell me a bit more about, you know, like, mention resourcefulness. I mean, you know, what else actually happened in terms of, you know, to give you this awareness of your own personal power and what is possible for you, you know, despite the fact that you had, you know, visual problems, etc. But then, you know, what else was there that really motivated you to do so many different things? Being an athlete, being an entrepreneur, being lots of different things, and now you're going to become a doctor, which I'm not surprised.
It's really around the doctor. It's kind of a little. I joke with people because, you know, my name is spelled with an I at the beginning, And
Yeah.
so I keep telling, like I told my family, I said, I just want people to call me Dr. I, because I think it sounds cool, because it sounds like EYE, you know,
Ah,
like your eye. And yet I can't see a drop, right? No light, no shadows, you can't see
okay.
anything. So
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yes.
it's kind of cool, isn't it? And they're like, oh my gosh, Yvonne, only you would think of something like that, you know. Um, but no, really, the idea of just pursuing acupuncture and Chinese medicine and herbal medicine is just to have more tools, to be able to offer people more tools, because massage therapy and athletic coaching, and right, it's not everyone's needed piece of equipment, right? And so the more tools I have, the more I can offer, then that's, you know, where I'd like to be.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but I think resourcefulness is interesting, because at times when you're needing a, a tool, you don't know where to find it, and
Yeah.
you don't find it when you need it at that moment.
It's true. True.
And sometimes it's because we may be so wrapped up in,
Mm,
like you were talking about, that polarity of emotions, or sometimes we're so wrapped up in that moment, and we
yeah.
can't seem to, you know, find our way out of that, because the emotion might be so intense.
Yes.
And it sometimes just takes reflection and going through, you know, that moment, and coming out of it the next day or months later or years later, and realizing, wow, this is what I could have done in that moment, you know.
Yes.
And so, but resourcefulness, I mean, you know, I wanted to, I feel like this is why I've grown a love of travel, because I realized that early on, you know, kids, you can look at National Geographics, you know, at the time, and that'll probably date me, right? But you can look at, you would have all these National Geographic shows and magazines, and people are talking about, look at those elephants, and they're so cool, and they're so huge. And description for a blind person is wonderful, but it's not the same as experiencing it.
Mm,
And I felt that when you have that opportunity to visually look at something, you can put yourself in that moment, and there's a different input into the brain that allows you to, you know, understand what it is you're looking at. And the descriptions of things just didn't quite do it for me. You know, when people used to say, oh, snow is as white as cotton balls, and I'm like, I'm so bored of that description, right? Like, so bored. And oh, fire is, you know, it's really hot, like when, you know, you feel steam, and it's like, no, no, no. Or orange is just hot like fire. And I was so bored of all of those descriptions, and I thought, this is lame, everyone uses the same descriptions, I'm so bored. So you know, so how do I experience like
mm,
these countries and these mountains and these animals, and right, and so I thought, well, the best way to experience it is to be there, to
sweet.
go to those places. And so how do I get to travel? And it, you know, the pieces, I'd have to say, have came together well, because I discovered running
Yes.
right after college,
Yeah.
and it turned out to be an athletic talent that I had no idea I had. And
Mm,
but through running, I mean, I started doing well, and I started getting encouraged to do some races, and then the races were no longer just in New York City, they were taking me out to, you know, to California and to Boston. And then I started doing even better. And all of a sudden they're like, you have to go compete at these other countries. And I was like,
Fantastic.
whoa, right? So this whole world has opened up
Yeah.
through running, you know, and I got to experience elephants and lions right through climbing Kilimanjaro with a whole team of runners. I mean, so it's just been a way of how can I make these things come to
Yeah.
fruition,
Yeah.
and without expecting it, they've come to be because I've put my efforts into an area, developed it,
Mm,
right? I mean, I was a little bit older when I got into running. And so really, you know, adapting the body and nutritional needs are different as you age, even as you're in your 20s and 30s, they're different from when you're a teenager. And so all of those things have just really helped me expand and find those experiences that I'd been hoping for
yeah.
earlier in life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so. so inspiring, you know, to listen to your story, because what comes to mind, I think, when I was training, because my original training was to become a teacher of adults with additional learning needs or physical
Mhm.
disabilities,
Mhm.
which included visual impairment. And I remember we did lots of exercises just to put us in the shoes of someone who had,
Mhm.
you know, either visual impairment or hearing impairment. And then they got me to be blindfolded, and it was, oh my goodness, you know, for 5 minutes I
Yeah.
had to dig deep and find other ways. I found that I had to listen, and I had to rely on touch and other things. And then I got introduced to Howard Gardner's 8 multiple intelligences, whereby, and that's something I'm a big proponent of,
Mhm.
not just in special educational teaching, but in all manner of teaching, regardless. You know, I don't view things as you know, a disability or whatever. I just see that we've all got varying abilities.
Mhm.
In some cases, some people, if they're not able to do the physics, engage their kinesthetic intelligence, then try visual. If you can't do visual,
Yeah.
then try musical or try
Right.
naturalistic. So it's to help everyone, you know, not just teachers, but everyone, just be aware that there are other ways that person can be stimulated. And then this
Mhm.
morning I did a podcast, well, because this podcast is part of a podcast series called Coach's Corner. And
Mhm.
you're my second coach today. And the first coach, she talked about, she's also a body conditioning coach. And so she was talking about how powerful the body is, that we can't sometimes rely on our mind to fix our mind. We have to use parts of our body and certain touch and senses
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
able to, and in some respects, that also in my modality we use techniques such as emotional freedom technique, whereby
Oh,
we use the
EFT. Yeah.
tips that, yeah, EFT, we use the tips of our fingers to then tap some
Tapping.
meridian
Mhm.
point, and then we do affirmations, and then the meridian point is an outlet for potentially the affirmations to go in, and then the affirmations, and then, well, the affirmation to go through to your mind, but then the negative energy to go out of the meridians
Right.
at some point. And it just goes to show how and I've had emotional freedom technique done to me about 7 years ago, when I went through a very difficult period in my personal life.
Mhm.
I went to see a complementary alternative practitioner because of excessive anxiety, stress as well, with my work and everything. And then she did this technique. I'd never seen it before, but then I
Mhm.
understood the power of connecting the mind and the body together.
Mhm.
It was just really powerful. It just gives you more opportunities and more possibilities than you ever
Absolutely.
thought. You know, it expands the mind, and when you really dig deep and you be resourceful. So it's
It
really
sounds like we're
inspiring.
gonna have to exchange, right? You can do some EFT and I can do some acupuncture on you, and I think this is great.
I don't think this is going to be the last podcast we're going to do together, Yvonne. I hope we can do more, because there's so much,
Thanks.
you know, I think we're just scratching the surface with your amazing, remarkable story. We all have a story to tell, but obviously I'm very honored that you're here and sharing your insights as well. And in terms of like you mentioned your, you know, some of the current projects you're involved with, could you want to just explain a bit more about those, in terms of what you currently,
Sure.
because you mentioned that you're doing a doctorate at the moment, and so what is, do you, I have to ask you a big, you probably, it's, I don't know whether it's too much of an open question, but do you have it, you must have more ambitions. There's things that you still want to do, that still you are pipelining towards, you're building a pathway.
I hope so. I hope so. I think that's kind of what keeps us going, right? When I look at people that, like my husband's uncle, he lived to 95, and
Wow.
he
Uh,
was gardening till he was 93. I
oh,
mean, when I see that in action, it's not just that he was talking about it. I saw him gardening, and
yes.
weeding and planting, and he did it the old fashioned way, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to keep things in the pipeline in order just to keep you going, give you purpose, give you motivation to keep moving physically, and then
Yeah.
emotionally and mentally. It keeps you sharp because you're planning on, how do I make this work? You're looking for solutions. What do I need, right? So
Yes.
all those things I think are super important. But yeah, I think so. I opened my massage practice last year here. I'm now living in Minnesota in the USA, and we are the first healthcare business owned by a Paralympian in the state of Minnesota, which is super exciting.
Wow.
And I just think, being able to share with people in so many different ways. Now I'm on, one-on-one with clients, working with them and doing some running coaching as well. And so expanding just, to offer acupuncture and herbal medicine. And, the hope is to start to incorporate coaching, with my clients in the next month or so. It's going to be the launch of my coaching program. So I'm excited for that.
Excellent.
And, I think from there, I have other things that I haven't quite been able to bring to fruition yet, right? I've always wanted to do an Ironman, so that's in my bucket list. I've
Wow.
done triathlons, of course, but I haven't quite done an Ironman. And part of that is just that it requires having a guide who will train, and then even a guide who will compete with you. And that's a lot to ask of someone. And, other blind people and visually impaired people have done it before. And
Yes.
so I know it's possible. And if I hadn't had those other people laying the groundwork for me, it's something I would have to do, right? But it's been done, so I know it's possible from that respect. It just takes a lot of time to find someone who's willing to commit almost a year's worth of training themselves, right? Unless they're already a pro. And if they're listening to your podcast, then by all means, reach out to me. I want to talk to you. I'm looking for a guide for a potential Ironman in the next three years. So
Right.
that's on my bucket list.
Okay, we'll have to do something now. I'll have to try to put that on my for you.
And I think from there, I'm working on writing a book of my life story that will hopefully also share my learnings and lessons with
Got one
people.
fire here sitting in
Yeah.
front of you, even though in a different part of the country, but
Yeah. So that's that's slowly in the works, because school right now with the doctoral program, it takes up a lot of time. But so that's on the back burner, and so that's part of life. I won't share too much else, otherwise it won't be a surprise.
Well, that's just amazing. That's just that's just is the icing on the cake, really, in terms of what is possible, and I know that we all go through things. We all have challenges and personal difficulties to get through. But if, say, just to wrap the podcast up, if somebody I don't know, if they felt there just wasn't any way forward for them to come out of their situation, that they just can't seem to get unstuck, what would you tell that person? They can't see any hope in them because they feel held back by something that is in their past, or something to do with their body, or anything of that nature. What advice would you give them?
Oh, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is whenever I have felt those emotions, it's always helpful to let those emotions out of the body.
Yeah.
So if that means that you need to cry, if it means that you need to, go run so many miles, if it means you need to, be angry and punch, use those boxing bags, those punching bags, if you need to get physically, and that's very much right from a Chinese medicine perspective. Like, women are much more introspective and much more emotional, and that's the yin aspect of life, and men are much more energetic and much more yang aspect of life. And that's why you often say, okay, if you need to get that emotion out physically, and not that we as women don't do that, we certainly can, and some of us do, but whatever that is, because you have to get that emotion out of the system, out of the body physically, otherwise it stays in you. And then years later, it's still in you because you haven't released it. So if it's grieving that needs to happen, to find a way that you can do that, get those emotions out, whether that means coaching, whether, seeking a coach, seeking a therapist, whether it just means turning to a mentor and saying, hey, I need some time to connect with you, because I feel that mentors are really powerful in the sense that they're not there to tell you what to do. They're there to offer guidance, right? Very much like a coach.
Yes.
Right? But you have to come to your mentor, right? Your mentor's not going to come seek you, just like we as coaches can't necessarily come seek you because we don't know exactly what it is you need until we meet you, right? So, and that's a two-way street, right? I mean, we can do marketing and we can write posts and we can be on LinkedIn, and that's our way of getting out to you and saying, we are here, right? We're here to help you, to guide you, to inspire you, to move you. But in the end, you make the choice as to whether you connect with us, right? And I like that. I like that feeling of, as someone who's sought out coaching in the past, I like feeling empowered. Yes. I like feeling that I have this choice that I can make, and my choice is going to be to seek help. It's not that it means I'm weaker or I can't do it on my own, because hey, if someone's done it already, why reinvent the wheel, right? And so if there's a coach or a mentor that can help me in that aspect, go to, man, right? Go to it. They've done it. They can help you through it. They can guide you through it. If you don't want the help, then think of it as guidance, right? Think of it as resourcefulness. Think of it as consulting. Think of it as a dialogue exchange. And oftentimes when we're having the dialogue, we end up coming up with our own answers that we hadn't verbalized before.
Yes.
And so the brain hadn't internalized it and made it useful. So definitely, like, let the emotions out and then connect. Make a connection with someone, and maybe not someone in your circle per se, right? Because your friend just might tell you, no, it's okay, you're okay, everything's going to be fine. And maybe you need that reassurance at that moment, but that's not helping you move forward with potential solutions, right? Having that objective person and that objective view is super helpful. And I think that's where, coaching and mentoring is so helpful. So those would be my two things. Get the emotions out and seek advice from coaches or mentors.
That's amazing advice. It really is. And I hope that if anyone feels as though, in terms of what Ivonne has just said there, that they actually have been thinking about things and they're not really sure how to move forward, and they feel that there are some blockages there and they're not able to reach out, then obviously, please do reach out to Ivonne. In terms, she can help you, she can guide you. And essentially, if anybody wanted to receive coaching from you, as a result of watching this podcast, then what is the best way for them to get in touch with you directly? Do you offer a discovery call or consultations, things like that initially?
Absolutely. I have a discovery call that I offer, and it's anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour. And if you feeling that might be too long, we're adaptable here. We can shorten it as well.
Yes.
And I would say you can email me. It's pretty straightforward, yvonne.m.schmidt@gmail.com. And I'm sure, Sunil, you can get that out to your listeners as well. That's just my email. And then we can be in touch so I can send you additional details. And, and if I'm not the coach that can help you, by all means, I'm more than happy to connect you with resources and other coaches who I think would be better suited to work with you, right? And so because I know everyone has different needs. We all have different needs, different desires. It's just like some people who come in and they massage clients and they only prefer female therapists. Others come in and they only prefer male therapists, right? And so the idea is so that you are feeling as comfortable as possible with the person you're going to be working with one-on-one as best as you can, because that's where you're going to then be able to make the most progress, right?
It's really
So
amazing.
yeah, so reach out to me by email, or if you find me on Facebook, that's also another way to connect with me, and you can send me a message and then we can be in touch by email after that. So either way is good.
That is brilliant, Ivonne. And what I will do is, well, what we'll do is put the contact details down in the description box. And so anybody watching this podcast, if they want to get in touch with Ivonne, you'll then find all of the details there, and then you know, just take it from there, really. But so thank you so much indeed, Ivonne, for your time. I'm so, again, very, very privileged to have had you as a very special guest on my podcast, and hopefully we will work again in the very near future.
Absolutely. I think when I get going, I'd love to connect with you, because I know you have an amazing story and you've had so many experiences that have also been challenging for you throughout life. And this is our, this is our way of connecting, which I'm so grateful for the internet. And right, like, we can connect from thousands of miles away and share with people across the world, just, a sense of hope and a sense of inspiration and a sense of, there's always a way to move forward. And sometimes that way means we partner with each other, we share with each other, so that we don't feel like we're walking alone.
No, absolutely. And we all have a story to share, and people can gain inspiration. I mean, from your story, I mean, I was personally inspired as a human being listening to your story
Thank
in
you.
the midst of the lockdown, thinking, oh my God, there's me feeling a little bit unsure about the lockdown and getting a little bit unhappy with it and a bit sad. And then I listen to your story and I think, oh God, what's my problem? you got this to do, you got that to do, you can do this. And it was just so inspiring. It just gave me such an impetus to then be even better than I am now, and still keep moving and still keep going, as you say. That's a truly inspiring story. Thank you so much indeed, Ivonne.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Take care. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.